Previously on Handbook for Mortals. I know it has hardly been an hour since we've arrived, but I love you, Deli. Stop trying to flirt with me, Charles. I have a daughter to save, and I don't have time to fall for your irresistible charm. 5 minutes later. Oh, I love you too! Can someone please explain to me what's going on? Dela has begun her tale of how Sherry came into existence, and Sherry brags how her mother is a gifted storyteller with a vice grip on figurative language and delivery. Why, one would believe they were watching, listening to a Steven Spielberg flick. Mac and Charles hang onto every word with rapturous attention. I don't know, Sarah, you could have moved this opening paragraph elsewhere and let the backstory speak for itself. Just a thought. Anyway, it is 1977, and a circus troupe has set up shop on some large empty field. In a small tent sits a gorgeous young Dela laying out cards for a personal reading. She doesn't take her eyes off the layout, even as a boisterous, young, and very handsome Charles slips in and noisily pokes around. Though Dela doesn't glance up, she knows how tall and, again, handsome he is. Wait, all this time he's had blue eyes? So how about we all agree to disregard that, okay? Yeah? I mean, too many characters have blue and or green eyes in fiction anyway. No one's gonna miss this. When Dela asks what Charles is doing here, the 20-year-old sarcastically replies, "What, you didn't foresee my arrival with your little cards? They didn't tell you why I'm here?" Sarcasm? Who is this guy? I know people change as they age, but wow, what a shift. Also, Dela, sweetie, I thought you could read minds. She says she cannot see things if she's not actively looking into it. Charles's confusion further annoys Dela, which in turn charms him. Her very cute scrunched nose is utterly adorable. Hell, she's been stunningly beautiful since they first met, but she has never been impressed by his pretentiousness. If you remember from the last chapter, Dela told us how Sherry never took no for an answer, and I joked that she must have gotten that from her father. Turns out I'm correct. Charles was, and I guess still is, the type who is not used to rejection, let alone repulsion. He doesn't share her beliefs and doesn't understand how she takes herself so seriously. Predictably, they do not hang out and aren't friends. Yet he's compelled to chase the free bird and cage her. Now, why does that ring familiar? Probably not important. Charles's one-track mind is so preoccupied with methods to charm Dela that he almost misses what she says. Something that would have annoyed her even further, but that would make her even cuter in his eyes. But don't worry, he catches the gist of her answer. Yet we get the entirety of said answer in the next paragraph. Just like last chapter, the order of operations for these ideas is so wonky it reminds me of online PEMDOS rage bait. Dela explains how she doesn't have an omniscient sight, as that would be an insane overload, hence why she didn't foresee his arrival or intent. She compares her ability to being in a house, having to look out a window to see outside. It looks like Charles catches more than just the gist of her response and challenges her to focus on him then and determine his intent, projecting arrogance as a disguise for curiosity. How is this beautiful young woman able to swindle people into believing her lies? See, the illusionist wants tangible proof that the card reader isn't a charlatan. She may be a beauty worthy of the chase, but man, she is so full of shit! Dela begrudgingly complies, ordering him to take a seat as she shuffles her deck. She takes the opportunity to get a good look at him. Underneath those totally not blue eyes are signs of exhaustion and sleep deprivation. The cards are placed into 3 stacks, presumably face up. No specific cards are mentioned, but it's vaguely implied that she is looking at something to interpret. For all I know, she's just dealing out cards and spouting cold reads. For instance, she asks for confirmation on his sleep deprivation, and upon getting it, she states the obvious: he's having nightmares. Sherry jumps in and explains that Dela's method does in fact begin with a general cold read, and then steadily hones in on the client, a basic funnel approach. Some people are easier reads than others, and she usually vibes better with folks she's more psychically in tune with. Considering her animosity, she's surprised how strong her psychic signal connection is with him. Charles confirms her statement. Still not impressed, she places down more cards, and something gives her pause. Her eyes close in concentration. where she grabs Charles's hand and they both feel some jolt of energy. When she opens her pretty eyes, the nightmare is laid bare. In Charles's dreams, he always dies by gunshot, and it's so visceral that he wakes up with chest pains and cannot fall back asleep. This pinpoint accuracy leaves Charles more than a little freaked out. Golly gee, Deli, that's exactly what he's been dreaming every night. He hasn't told anyone about his nightmare. He is freaking out. He tells Deli that she described his nightmare exactly. He hasn't told anyone. He looks completely freaked out. She snaps at him to not call her that. He's aware of her abhorrence of the absurd nickname. After all, she doesn't serve sandwiches. This pivot distracts Charles from his shock. She could totally serve sandwiches. It'd be great for business. Nothing says great for business like free sandwiches. Dude, Deli's deli was right there. Right there! Oh my god, this bozo is so stupid! His game lacks so hard you can call him the anti-Rizzler. And yet, Sarum spends a paragraph in an attempt to make the deli sandwiches bit pass as flirting. Of course she falls for it. He's promoted from very handsome to stunningly gorgeous, which convinces her that he's funny too, apparently. Usually her hackles are raised whenever his pretentious, annoying ass is around, so his positive qualities go by the wayside. But now that they're alone, and he can focus his charm directly on her, she inevitably wobbles. The Freebird is almost in range. Upon Charles's curiosity, Dela elaborates on her abilities. She's clairvoyant and clairaudient, where the cards serve as her tools to see and hear in a way he cannot. Charles is speechless for once. Does he believe her now? She can keep relaying what he already knows, or proceed to determine the cause behind the nightmares. As she scoops up the cards, he pleads to continue, so she hands him the deck and orders him to shuffle it. In order to easily view his past and future, he needs to contribute his energy to the cards. Worry not, while she may bite, the cards don't. This little joke intrigues the 21-year-old. Whoa, wait. I thought he was 20. How long has he been in that tent? Girl. As he nervously shuffles, Dela advises him to keep his mind clear and focused, to shuffle until his hands feel tingly and warm, until the vibes are right, where the cards could jump from his hands and deal themselves. At that point, cut the deck into a row of 3 piles. Practically on reflex, he shuffles with a flourish. While this impresses her, she's a proud tsundere who refuses to give him that satisfaction. The deck is cut and she delivers the same explanation and agreement speech that we saw her give back in the Chapter 8 Part 2 video. Dela then picks up the pass pile to lay out in a 3x4 spread, taking a moment to study each row of cards. She closes her eyes to concentrate, then fans them back together in its order. The process repeats with the present and future piles. Dela asks for Charles's hands and closes her eyes to focus one more time. Meanwhile, he ogles her beauty again, this time honing in on where her top frames her chest in all the right places. Dela opens her eyes and catches his unsettled gaze. But this is no surprise, since his wandering eye has incited his predicament in the first place. See, Charles had a mutually drunken one-night stand with his assistant Betty, and his magical dick made an obsessive stalker out of her. She has harbored an immense crush on him for over a year, and that night 6 weeks ago marked the beginning of their life together. In her mind, Charles is in disbelief. He was aware of the crush, but not of its intensity. So he chose to ignore the problem, aware that it'd be a bad idea to have a situationship with a coworker. Something he won't care about in a couple decades. Anyway, alcohol has a way of making things just happen, and it didn't seem like a big deal to him. Since then, he distanced himself from her to maintain some workplace integrity, or to cowardly avoid the awkwardness. Possibly both. But this upset Betty to the point where she would sneak into Charles's tent and watch him sleep. Her bubbling resentment boiled over 2 weeks ago when she saw him hook up with some other girl. It takes Charles Stinson a hot minute to remember that pretty blonde who wasn't as fun in the sack as Betty, and she wasn't even amazing either. Oh yeah, Deli, I can totally see that irresistible charm. Anywho, Betty is a woman scorned. Honestly, you can say that about any woman in this book not named Sherry or Dela. Though, I appreciate that Sarum can be self-aware of the cliche at least once. A lot of writers from the 2010s weren't capable of that. Some still aren't. Betty plans to have her revenge this coming Sunday during Charles's bullet trick. She plans to switch out the shells for real bullets and, when the time comes, actually shoot him in the chest. If she can't have him, no one will! What can be done about it? Glad you asked. Here's where the future pile comes in. She has run through all possible outcomes and chose the 4 least awful, and only one of the rows works out okay. That single viable solution? Wait until Sunday, call the cops right before the show and persuade them to head over. Then wear a bulletproof vest and play dead after Betty shoots him. If Charles tries anything beforehand, no one would believe him, he'd have no proof, and Betty's obsession would continue to fester. Out of countless possible scenarios and outcomes, the best we can do is bulletproof vest? I mean, sure, yeah, I'm aware of the kiss rule, but is that the extent of our imagination here? I'll hold on to some hope that Charles will somehow spin something more creative out of this banality. When the arrogant dipshit wonders if he saw the future in his dreams, she takes a chunky paragraph to explain how that's not the case. Basically, vibes are the most potent force ever, and can be honed into a strong power. When Betty watched Charles sleep, her malicious vibes were intense enough to manifest as his nightmares and played out her revenge fantasy. Another reason he can see these dreams may be due to fate intervening, as though Charles isn't meant to die yet. His sperm is needed for a greater purpose! But Dela can't see any further. Charles's reticence to commit to the bulletproof vest has created a temporary dead end. Unable to understand how she knows this stuff, he says, "What you're saying she wants to do sounds pretty crazy, don't you think?" While his eyes are wide and his tone is angry, the question sounded a bit rude, but it wasn't meant in that way, and she could hear by his tone he was asking it as a question. Hey, come here, girl. You know what else implies a questioning tone? Now this squig little fucker right here. The pot lies that she may not know what the kettle sees in Charles, but love do be deaf, dumb, and blind. It has taken one solo encounter for Dela to be attracted to his supposedly extremely good-looking charm and magneticism. He's probably pretty irresistible when he really wants to woo a girl. Charles's fingers brush against the free bird's soft feathers. Girly pop, he's only irresistible through the grace of your god's hand. Also, you may have noticed my copious highlights and verbal emphasis, but this chapter really loves to mention how very handsome, stunningly beautiful and gorgeous, and extremely good-looking Charles and Dela are. It's obviously shallow, but in a book like this, what else is there? For some inexplicable reason, Dela grabs his hand and they both make googly eyes. There's a mysterious breeze and her smile turns strained as she pulls away and denies any worry. But Charles sees through her lie. Dela deflects, saying she has an appointment coming. If he wants to live, wear the vest. Or not. Either way, his nightmares will end Sunday night. Charles protests that he has to show he's not wearing a vest as a part of the act, so the challenge will come in faking that. Bro, you're a magician. Elaborate misdirections are your damn bread and butter. The tension is cut with a well-timed arrival of Dela's client. Charles rises and pulls his chair out for the older woman in a gentleman's fashion, as opposed to what? Swiping the football back so the lady falls back on her ass? Charles thanks Dela for her time and kisses her hand, maintaining that oogling eye contact. She merely nods. Determining that she has nothing more to say, he bounces. With a few deep breaths, Dela greets her client and begins once again to shuffle her cards. End of chapter. You know, the actual meat of this chapter could have been an email. Or cliff notes that could be combined with some other chapter. Like, okay, so I use tarot to utilize my magic, something that is real by the way, and I need to use my power to save Sherry. Boom. She also could have done a read on Mac as a demonstration and explain her clairvoyance and clairaudience if that really is pertinent information. Unless we had to see how Dela and Charles met to prove their supposed attraction, but it's a shallow meet cute, who cares? For all intents and purposes, the feeble illusion of a ticking clock is busted. I mean, we all know it was to begin with, since Sherry spoiled that for us back in chapter 15. So what are we doing here? Why does any of this matter? If anything, I'm more interested in Charles's evolution, or de-evolution. Sure, he kept his basic charisma stats, but how in the did this bozo's personality change from a socially adept idiot to an inept one? Remember back in The Emperor where Mac had to mansplain Charles to Sophia? He said that while Charles can handle himself at events where he assumes his debonair facade, he stumbles in genuine social settings, even though he seemed to wear the same sort of mask at that restaurant gathering back in chapter 14, but whatever. However, young Charles doesn't seem that way to me at all. The change in his manner of speech comes to mind as well. Older Charles has never not been presented as prim and proper and well put together and what have you. But young Charles can explain to us 3 times that he is totally freaking out. It gives me the impression that young Charles was a type of guy able to live off of cup ramen and pizza rolls for a month, whereas present Charles doesn't know what those are. That is a drastic shift. I am so curious how we get from point A to B. There had to have been a severe depressive spiral at some point, trauma that made him establish his wall of formality as a means of self-protection. If we got a whole chapter of this meet cute bullshit, we can have one of Charles going through it with blackjack and hookers. I mean, it's not like time is of the essence or anything.